And it's my pleasure as Secretary General of the CBU to say a very warm welcome to those who have joined us, both the participants from our membership as well as our co-host for today, the second in our series of digital radio webinars, this time with WorldDAB or DAB+. We are, as a union, particularly concerned about not only the current challenges and opportunities for our members, but also the future. And there is no question that digital radio is the future of this medium. It continues to be the most accessed medium in the region, and it does so in a number of formats, in a number of ways, and using all forms of technology, whether at the small community level, whether in small markets such as 5,000 persons in Montserrat, or in the large markets of the Caribbean, like Cuba, with audience up to 11 million. We are particularly glad to have this group of experts, a couple of whom are known to us from previous association with the CBU, and others who are brand new, but we hope will become long-term partners. Bernie O'Neill, the project director of WorldDAB, welcome to you and the team, and we thank you for your support, continuing, of the CBU. Over to you, Bernie.
Thank you very much, Sonia, and thank you also to you, Gary, for having us give this seminar to CBU. We're very happy to continue the relationship that we started with you a few years back when our partner and board member Lynn Mansfield went to your event, and also last year Jackie, who's speaking in this webinar. So I'm going to start straight away and share my screen and go straight into my presentation. So as Sonia said, I'm the project director of WorldDAB. My office is in London, but our members are from around the world. So in this webinar today, you'll have a small sample of those members. I'll give a brief update about the global status of rollout of DAB around the world, and I'll also speak a little bit about how to get started and how we can support you. Gabriel Palmeri of GatesAir will talk about the economics of delivering DAB and comparing it to FM and IP. We have Ben Poor of the European Broadcasting Union, who will give a technical overview of DAB+. And then that will be followed by Yvette Dore, who's the Communications Director at Digital Radio UK, the national rollout body for digital radio, and she'll give the case study from the UK, and then another case study from Jacqueline Bierhorst of the Netherlands, Digital Radio Netherlands, which is the rollout body there. So straight into my presentation. I think I have too many slides. I'll go quickly. A little bit about who WorldDAB is. We're the global standards body for DAB, and we promote the standard worldwide. Our members are broadcasters, policymakers, regulators, and all the stakeholders across the ecosystem of DAB digital radio. We encourage receiver, auto, and mobile phone manufacturers to fit DAB, and we support broadcasters by sharing best practice between stakeholders. At the moment, our membership has seen really a spurt of growth. We have over 100 members across 29 countries at the moment and growing. That means we've got about over 1,300, I think it is at the moment, experts in our network who are available to help with that exchange of best practice and knowledge on how to deploy DAB. So what are the benefits of DAB? Well, they can be broken into three categories: those for the listeners, those for the broadcasters, and those for the government. So for the listeners, the benefits are the increased choice offered by the fact that with DAB, you can have at least 18 stations on one frequency, the improved reception quality that digital offers, and also all of the new features offered by digital. You'll hear more about that from Ben later in this webinar. For broadcasters, the benefits are the chance to innovate with all those new stations and new formats. They can better target their audience, and of course they can experience the cost efficiencies of lower distribution. For governments, DAB, with the increased offer that it has and the additional benefits, can reach educational goals, offer multiple languages, and a greener distribution. So a little bit about the global status of DAB around the world. At the moment, DAB is on air, and I think at the latest count, 41 countries. That means about 470 million people are now able to listen to DAB, and there's about 60 million DAB receivers sold. So we just say that to convey the fact that it is a pretty established standard in many countries. 8 years ago, there were just the 4 established DAB markets, the UK, Norway, Denmark, and Switzerland. However, today, if you look at the map of Europe, it's a much different picture. We have the first countries switching off FM, and we have a lot more markets, particularly towards the east of Europe, of various different population sizes, I would say as well, because of course UK, France, Germany are quite high populations, but then we have smaller countries like Slovenia, Croatia, so population-wise echoing the Caribbean region. And of course, it's not just a European story. We're seeing DAB being adopted around the world. Larger countries further east again, like Turkey, Ukraine, North Africa, Tunisia, Algeria. Several countries, I think 5 or 6 countries in the Arab states are deploying DAB. South Africa has a significant deployment, and of course across Asia Pacific as well, and most significantly Australia, which launched DAB Plus in 2009, and I think 2009, and I think they're about 80% population coverage. So our members, we would say that radio needs DAB Plus. Well, why is that? The first reason that comes up most often is because FM is often full, and this makes it difficult for broadcasters to innovate. But with DAB, they can offer new content, new services, a greater, richer listening offer, and with more listeners, increased revenue. What we're seeing now is there are many new ways of listening, lots of new smart devices. There's more intense competition with online streamed services. So we would say that DAB is required to secure the future of radio and to help broadcasters to innovate and to retain their independence. Also in the car dashboard, a lot of radio listening happens in the car, and with new connected dashboards, it's vital that DAB retains its prominent position in the car. As I've said, there's limited capacity on FM with DAB. So what does DAB offer? Well, looking at Europe, where we have the most advanced markets, you can see across 5 key markets, the increased offers up to 6 times more stations on DAB. And DAB delivers benefits for society, and these can be summarized as they offer media plurality, the spectrum efficiency I already referred to, the lower costs and the lower emissions, more from Gabriel on that. And it also offers enhanced traffic information and importantly, reliability in emergencies through emergency warning. And of course, free to air, no gatekeeper. So broadcasters, they of course will have concerns, and most often these can be summarized to the following 3, which is how do I control my costs? Will I lose my listeners? And what about receivers? So what we've seen from the countries that have deployed DAB so far is that there are successful strategies that can be adopted or adapted to different markets. And one of those is infrastructure sharing. And we've seen examples where there are public-private partnerships. In other countries that have launched, we've seen some forms of government support or funding or other policy initiatives. And there are also regulatory incentives based on FM license renewal or the relaxing of ownership rules. A little bit about cost analysis. EBU did some research, and I know GatesAir have also done some research. Suffice to say that in a best case, DAB distribution can be 10 times cheaper than FM. So more on that, as I said, later. What about the DAB receivers? Well, they are now mass market. There's about 60 million sold, and prices are going down all the time. I think at the moment they're from around $20 US. Sometimes they can be found for less. There are various different types of receivers, all sorts, you know, that we currently have for FM and portable devices, etc. And importantly, all the major car manufacturers are now fitting DAB+, and we know that the chip makers who make those chips, they operate at a global level, so you know it's not a problem even with the cars. A really encouraging recent development has been the development of a consistent marketing of DAB+ across Europe, and this is very much happening as we speak, and I think you might see some evidence of that later in this webinar as well. At the European Parliament level, we're excited about a discussion going on at the minute about regulation at the EU level that all radio devices should have digital capability. This is very much work in progress as well, but very, very significant. So I would advise you to stay close to our news to find out more about that. And as I said, car makers are fitting DAB in the advanced markets, such as Norway, which switched off FM last year. 98, nearly all new cars come with DAB as standard, and they're working hard on converting the cars that are already on the road. And there's a lot of car converters that are on the market, and more coming on the market. So how can WorldDAB support broadcasters in the Caribbean? Well, we offer workshops, support, tailored advice on all features of DAB, both technical operation, network planning, how to set up a trial. We can connect you with equipment manufacturers and receiver manufacturers. And basically, we're just there to give quite detailed assistance on all the different aspects. So that's it, really. That's most of what I wanted to say. DAB is making significant progress thanks to all the collaboration. We would say that DAB is required to secure the future of radio, and we are here to help and support. So that's it. Thank you. We'll take questions at the end, I believe. Unless somebody has a burning question now, I will move on to the next speaker. And that is over to you, Gabriel.
Okay, good morning. My name is Gabriel Palmeri. I'm solution architect of GatesAir for Latin America and the Caribbean. And during this presentation, we will analyze the cost advantages of DAB transmission. Okay. In the past, energy consumption and end-to-end efficiency of the analog transmitters were rarely considered during the selection of a vendor or a technology point of view. But with the continuous increase on energy prices, many broadcasters start to pay attention on these parameters to reduce the cost of operating the transmitters. Many of them have, for example, started looking at sharing different structure to reduce the redundant costs of the operation. What in the past used to be green was more like a statement of social responsibility. Now it's being taken more seriously because it impacts the operation cost of the station. On the other hand, digitalization of the signals brings another benefits, not only by improving the channel density, spectrum efficiency, and power reduction. The DAB Plus standard will allow to transmit several programs with the same transmitters, allowing to consolidate several stations on a single transmitter. Also, being a critical digital modulation gives more robust signals, incorporating error correction, which translates in less power needed to cover the same area when compared to an analog signal. So Ben will be more in-depth talk about this part of the standard. So considering that DAB plus a single transmitter can carry up to 18 signals, the power consumption is dramatically reduced compared with the 28 analog transmitters. This is also impacts the rest of the infrastructure, as the smaller antennas needed require less space on the towers, and also reducing the size of the buildings where the transmitter will be installed. If we look at the spectrum optimization, with the analog technology, we need a complete channel to transmit a single radio or single. But with DAB, we can transmit up to 9 radios in the same spectrum, while with DAB Plus, we can transmit up to 28 due to the use of modern advanced codecs that allows more compression without sacrificing the quality of the audio. DAB Plus and the DMB is in the same bandwidth. One thing to get into the number of the solutions, I want to talk about a little bit about the difference between what we call broadcasting, traditional radio, or webcasting, or iRadio, or streaming over IP. So broadcasting is a purely point-to-multipoint system where we have a transmitter that sends the signals and can be received by any number of receivers. While in a webcasting scenario, we have individual connections between the servers and each receiver, which limits the number of receivers that the network can support at a given time. If we look at the operating cost, broadcasting moves most of the cost to the operator of the system that has to buy the transmitter and pay the electric bill each month. And the listeners only need to buy a receiver to get the signal, that's all. On the webcasting case, the listener has to pay for the internet access. And if he's using a cell phone, he will be charged for the data being consumed, while the broadcaster usually gets billed on bandwidth consumed to serve the connected listeners. So it's a shared cost between the broadcaster and the listeners. And finally, I think Ben will talk about this. Traditional radio is more robust during emergencies due to the fact that the broadcaster is responsible to maintain the transmitter operating, and the listener only needs batteries on their receivers to get information. While with radio over IP, we have more players involved in the path between the broadcaster and the listeners. We have the internet provider that connects the broadcaster to the internet, the provider of the internet access to the listener, and also the electric company, to name a few. All of this may make less reliable the transmission of emergency communications between the broadcasters and the intended audience. So when we compare the cost of implemented analog DAB or DRM or HD radio, we have to take into consideration the prices per service or price per program, and not just the transmitter itself. We didn't include the IP radio in this comparison, as from what we saw previously, the cost is more on the listener side than on the broadcaster side. So if we compare the prices of the transmitter alone, FM and DRM are more or less at the same level. It's less expensive as it is less power to cover the same geographical area. But when we take into consideration that the DAB system must filter and head-end, borders, max, and other equipment, DAB systems, the most expensive, around 180 to 111 Ks for or 86K for analog FM. But on this, we're taking the only the price of the system transmitter, not the systems. As we mentioned, the key point of this analysis is comparing the price per service. In the analog FM, it only carries one program, so the total price that you pay is only for one program. While in DAB Plus, we are carrying 18 programs, like in this example, and the cost is shared between the 18 of them. And on DRM, you can only carry up to 2, 4 maybe, and it's around 13 Ks. So when you look at the final numbers, 13 Ks per service on DAB Plus system makes it the most cost-effective solution for the OPEX part of the equations, for the copper part. When we look at the operating cost of the network or transmitters, the energy is stated as the highest operational cost for the broadcasters. Here we compare against the situation between FM, DAB Plus for 18 radio programs and for the same coverage. So on FM, we need 18 transmitters. On iBook or DRM or CDR, we need only 4.5. And for DAB Plus, we can carry all of them on a single transmitter. So the power consumption also depends on the power efficiency in both FM and the increased power efficiency by new technologies of transistors and other improvement in the equipment. But this table shows the actual top efficiency values in the market, which are treated with the GatesAir transmitters, of course. Calculating the power consumption, FM is already behind DAB for a single transmitter. And if we consider 18 transmitters, radio programs, the decision becomes very good for DAB with a 20 times lower energy consumption compared to FM. Many advantages have been applied to this latest generation of transmitters to improve both efficiency, like the use of the latest generation of LD-MOS devices, but other aspects of the transmitter have been considering to reduce the cost of operating them, like less complexity, which also translates into higher reliability and easy serviceability. GatesAir has transmitters for DAB standard from 15 watts to 6.2 kilowatts, as well as a transmitter for FMHD or DRM standards. We cover all the current standards. Other technologies that can be considered for high power transmission is the use of liquid cool, where around 80% of the heat generated by the transmitter is transferred outside the building by the liquid, reducing drastically the HPC cost of the station, as the air conditioning only needs to cool only the 20% remaining on the room and not the whole heat of the transmitter. This also helps on reducing the energy bill even more. Other things that can be used also to reduce the operating cost is for air-cooled transmitters is ducted air rack, where the outer air is taken from into the rack, heated up by the transmitter, and evacuated the whole air directly out of the building. We don't heat up the whole building, just pass the air through the equipment. And for small transmitters, that can be installed in an outdoor shelters that provides a fast deployment and reduces site cost too. So in summary, the economics factors that need to be considered when selecting the future digital radio standards, DAB Plus standards enables a green tech operation due to the low power requirements and the ability to share the cost between several broadcasters. Always remember to consider the cost per service and not the transmitters alone and accessory price when doing an economic analysis of the different standards, and take into consideration the space savings, cooling requirement, and maintenance cost also in the analysis. So that's all for my part. I think Ben will be next with the more technical aspects of the DAB standard.
Thank you, Gabriel. If I just share my screen very quickly. I had to switch laptops at the last moment, so I'm confident this will work. If you just bear with me. So I'm hoping everyone can see that. Not if, excellent. Thank you, Bernie. So my name is Benjamin Poor, and I'm project manager for digital radio here at the EBU's Technology Innovation Department. There we go. Part of my role is to help our members in the technology landscape for digital radio, which we define as being across both broadcast and broadband distribution. The EBU recommends to its members that digital terrestrial broadcast networks are established using DAB+. This is important in terms of the most efficient use of available spectrum, as Gabriel was just saying, but also because DAB+ delivers additional features that are important if radio is to remain fresh and relevant for current and future generations. So to start, I'd like to take you through a brief technical overview of DAB+, some of its core capabilities and additional features. DAB+ is part of a family of technologies that share an underlying set of properties. Firstly, they're open and mature. The standards are freely available to anyone, being held at ETSI, the European Telecommunications Standards Institute. This means that manufacturers and other implementers of the technology do not need to pay any royalties to use it. It also means there is a large and mature community around the world about these technologies, as evidenced with the rollout of DAB+ across the world, membership of WorldDAB, and the range of manufacturers that produce DAB+ devices at a global affordable scale. Additionally, there are a number of free open source tools and systems to support DAB broadcast, more of which I shall mention later. It's flexible, allowing broadcasters, regulators, and others a much greater range of choices on how broadcast services are delivered. The nature of the system means that these choices can be changed quickly and easily at a later date, in a way that does not require any reconfiguration or retuning of a radio device. And finally, it's robust. DAB+ is designed for robust mobile delivery and consistent audio quality without the fade and hiss of analog. The DAB family includes both digital radio, so DAB and DAB+, and mobile TV standards, DMB, all of which can share the same infrastructure and be broadcast together. DAB+ has now largely replaced the original DAB across most countries, bringing listeners a more robust and higher quality audio experience due to using a newer audio codec. One important feature of the DAB family is that rather than having a single frequency for each radio service, it wraps a number of services into a group or ensemble, as Gabriel was mentioning. This is then multiplexed into a broadcast signal. I'll explain a little bit more about what benefits I see this bringing a little bit later on. So moving on to the different layers of the DAB system with this rather scary image, I'd like to thank Lindsay Cornell of the BBC for his kind use of this diagram. So at its core, DAB uses technologies that are now familiar to the world of mobile telephony. These serve to provide efficiency in its use of spectrum, but also making it more robust for transmission. Some of the higher layers also include a means of carrying arbitrary IP data for private applications, as well as a standard called MOT. This enables a small set of files to be sent in a rotating carousel to devices. This can then be used for sending things like slide images, logos, and program data. Files that are not critical, but can use a small amount of available bandwidth to ensure eventual delivery, in the same way that program guides are broadcast to digital TV boxes. So I'll go through some more uses of this additional data a bit later. So let's look at the user experience of radio. In terms of its evolution, we have had AM for around 100 years. This gave audiences the opportunity to listen to audio only. In the 1930s, FM was invented, which provided much better audio quality than AM, amongst other things. In 1984, the EBU published the RDS specification, which allowed a small amount of digital information to be carried alongside the analog signal, enabling things like station name and traffic information to be displayed to listeners. DAB+ provides the next step forward. As well as a more efficient broadcast system, it also allows for a greater range of non-audio elements to be provided to the listener. More information about the station, the program, what is currently being talked about, or the current song, in text or image form. An important additional point is that each evolutionary step also results in a more available capacity for radio services and lower costs, as we've just been hearing. DAB+ can result in significantly lower costs than equivalent networks on FM. So what about some of the core features? A number of the beneficial key features of DAB+ come from it being a multiplex technology. What does multiplexing of radio services mean in practice? The first point is about efficient use of spectrum. Spectrum is a limited and valuable resource. A greater efficiency in spectrum means the possibility to have additional radio services, or to use the spectrum for other purposes, such as data applications. To illustrate this improved efficiency, imagine a scenario where you have 15 local FM stations. Each of these will need a discrete frequency for a listener to tune to. Assuming a channel separation of 200 kilohertz results in a total spectrum use of 3 megahertz. Using DAB+, all of these radio services can be carried in a single multiplex, and thus a single center frequency. The total bandwidth of this multiplex would then be slightly over 1.5 megahertz. Less spectrum use for the same radio services provides you with more of this valuable resource to use for other purposes. The use of a multiplex also means a simplified distribution for radio services. Instead of having each studio having to connect to their own transmitter, they can now connect their audio feeds directly to a multiplexer, which is then connected to a transmitter. This then combines all the radio services together into a single feed, lowering distribution costs across all radio services. Another thing I'd like to talk to you about is the single frequency network. So typically when extending an AM or FM network, additional transmitters will need to be deployed with more frequencies in order to avoid destructive interference. With DAB+, a single frequency network can more easily be deployed in order to extend coverage without using additional frequencies, synchronized using GPS. Again, this ensures the efficient use of spectrum and reduces issues with spectrum coordination between different regions and countries. Within the multiplex, a low bandwidth but rapidly updating data layer provides devices with details on what services are being carried, received by devices regardless of what they are listening to. This is called the Fast Information Channel, or FIC. This channel ensures that a radio service receiving the multiplex knows the names, bit rates, identifiers of services, and how they may relate to each other, amongst other things. It allows a device to know when and how a multiplex is reconfiguring itself. For instance, if station names change, or there are new temporary pop-up stations for special events, for example. Emergency warning services, so switching devices automatically to an emergency channel when there's a problem somewhere, or changing the audio bitrate of a station, for instance, using more bandwidth for a music concert that may sound better. So these are some of the core functionality of DAB+, but radio is now more than just the audio, and having room to grow is important for the future. Additional data services can be carried in a multiplex, possibly attached to an audio service. So for instance, image slides can be sent alongside audio to show the current song and presenter name, news headlines, competition information, or even advertising during an ad break. This can then be shown on radio devices with color screens, such as in the home or in cars. Service and program data gives devices more information about the radio station, names in different languages, brand logos, descriptions, and more information about past and future programs and the current program. Traffic and travel can be used to provide more detail about incidents and travel conditions than is possible with the current FM system, including with planes and boats. Emergency warning is just mentioned. Functionality is available, a variant of which is used extensively in South Korea. Since the DAB system is also flexible, a number of cut-in solutions are available, commonly used in warning systems for tunnels in Europe. When an incident occurs, all radio services can be automatically reconfigured to carry the same emergency audio signal. This can then be augmented with images showing details about the incident, or scrolling text messages telling listeners what to do. As Gabriel just mentioned, broadcast is the best fit for any emergency warning system. DAB+ provides a number of options to practically achieve this. Any available bandwidth can also be used for private applications. For example, past projects that I'm aware of have included sending updates and information for cars over the air, as well as a system to distribute travel information to bus stops in the UK. This can be a potential source of revenue for network operators given available bandwidth. To finish, I'd like to take you through some areas of activity within the EBU around digital radio. So first of all, probably more importantly for us, we produce some recommendations at the EBU in order to help guide members and others. These are short, concise, but well-reasoned documents and provide an overview of what the EBU and its members recommend. Under the radio topic, we have R138, the recommendation on digital radio deployment. This recommends that DAB+ is established by broadcasters and that digital radio be accompanied by additional text, information, and visual features. We also run a week of events in mid-February around digital radio for all audiences, technical, strategy, enthusiasts, open to the public. This year's events explore the user experience of radio and how we can improve this in order to be able to make radio fit for the future. This year, we were lucky enough to be joined by some key influencers around the world, including Sam Matheny, the Chief Technical Officer of the NAB, whose message was that radio must look as good as it sounds. Incidentally, we will be streaming next year's event for anyone to view, so please let me know if you're interested in that. Finally, I'd like to talk a little bit about what is sometimes called small-scale DAB, but what really should be called low-cost DAB. This is currently used in a number of trial services in the UK, Poland, Germany, France, and Denmark, and also for commercial services in Switzerland, covering some very large cities and very large populations. The difference is it uses commodity hardware, so things that you can buy at shops or get off the shelf or order on the internet, and also, more importantly, freely available open source software. Growth in this way of doing DAB broadcasting is rapid. It's not just small community stations across Europe. It's used professionally to deliver digital radio at a significantly lower cost in some countries. Again, it's based on open source software. So the most important thing is if you think there's a feature that needs to be added to it, you can be involved in the development of this system and add things to that yourself. For smaller and isolated communities, it can be very useful, used easily and cheaply to provide local DAB+ services, but it can also be scaled up to serve much larger areas and populations. So to conclude, I like to see that DAB+ is having many benefits. The technology itself is flexible to fit the needs of very different communities. The infrastructure needed can be scaled from low cost to higher specification as required, as Gabriel was mentioning. It is also mature and well supported, with a large number of manufacturers able to supply devices and chips at an affordable price. Thank you. Let me stop sharing if I am still am.
Mm-hmm.
So I seem to have lost the window to control, so please, please do.
Okay, so do you want to just say hi and I'll put on your presentation?
Okay. Hi, everyone. I think Bernie's just getting my presentation up for me. Great, thank you. Thanks, Bernie. I'm Yvette. I'm the Communications Director at Digital Radio UK, and I'm going to just tell you a little bit about the digital journey that we've been on here in the UK and explain the progress that we've made in recent years and the factors that have allowed us to make that progress, and also kind of demonstrate the benefits that digital radio has brought to our radio industry and also to listeners. So the first thing to say is that when you look at the UK radio industry, we're in really great shape. We're in good health and thriving. Listening is at record levels. There is more choice than ever before, and commercial stations, the private sector is doing really, really well. Radio, as I said, is as popular as ever. So just to bring that to life, 90% of the population tune into radio in the UK every week. So that's nearly 49 million listeners. One of the things that has been talked about as underpinning that, this is some fairly recent media coverage, is digital radio and how the UK radio industry has adapted to digital technology and implemented it. And it's been described as a golden age of radio, in fact. So the key pillars that have underpinned that and what that success has been built on in the UK is joint funding by the digital networks, a favourable licensing regime which encourages migration to digital radio, collaboration across broadcasters, government regulators, but then also through the supply chain, so vehicle and product manufacturers. And underlining all of that is clear policy, a clear government policy to review a decision about a potential switchover when certain criteria have been met, which is whether listening is at 50% of all listening and for coverage to match FM. And all these factors have come together to accelerate the progress that we've made in the last 5 years. Listening via digital platforms is already incredibly popular. 70% of listeners do so digitally. And if you look at all hours of listening, nearly 50% of listening is to a digital platform. It's just at 49.9%. And we anticipate that we will obviously tip over to that 50% when we receive our next listening figures, which will be in May, in a few weeks' time. So I should just point out that in the UK, we're a hybrid digital ecology. We're comprised of a digital broadcast platform, that's DAB, and then digital TV and online and apps. And although online and apps is, of course, a really important part of the picture and will be increasingly so as people start listening more on their connected speakers or voice-controlled speakers, you can see that it's the broadcast platform which really provides the backbone of our digital listening, with 73% of digital listening being to DAB, to the broadcast platform. So it's really crucial. When we look at digital listening via location, at home and in the workplace, the majority of listening is already digital. It's at 55%. It's only when we start looking at listening in the car that average comes down. So 32% of all listening that takes place in the car is to a digital platform. So it's lower, but it's growing really, really fast. It grew 25% year on year. And when we look at how radio is doing in the digital world, it's actually prospering. So this is data from Ofcom, our regulator, and it shows that you know, from the years from 2014 to 2016, the number of minutes of live radio actually increased per person by 12 minutes. And if you compare that to TV, it decreased by 14 minutes. So that's really, really gratifying. And it's, as I say, because of how radio has adapted and has adopted digital technology. And if you look at this chart, this shows the share of ear of all listening. So live radio actually accounts for 77% of all listening. And if you look at, say, the green piece of pie there, that is OMS, which stands for online music streaming services, and that only accounts for 5% of listening. So this really does show how relevant live radio still is. And then similarly, when we look at commercial revenues, and they're really, really robust. So 646 million commercial revenues last year, and that's been growing steadily across the last 7 years. And it's tracking more strongly than any other advertising medium apart from online. So I won't say too much about the 3 C's because I think Jacqueline's going to talk about some more C's later on, but we do like to talk about coverage, content and cars being the factors that have underpinned our success here. So just to talk about coverage, so there's been a coordinated expansion of DAB coverage on a national and local level, seeing all networks built out to FM equivalents. For national BBC, that means 97% of the population. For commercial and local, it means 91%. And also there's been a great increase in coverage across the UK road network. And then we also saw in March 2016, very significantly, the launch of a second commercial network. And when we look at cars, nearly 90% of new cars come with digital radio as standard. So that's been a really important factor. And it's because coverage has been built out so significantly that the car industry has had the confidence to invest in DAB in the way that they have. Now you'll see on this chart, it shows just how much growth there has been. So the blue line is the number of cars or percentage of cars that come with DAB as standard. And you can see that back in 2014, that was just at 50%. And now that's grown really sharply to currently be at 90%. So great progress in cars as well. So a little bit about content. So these are our BBC national stations. I'm going to talk about national content in the first instance. So you'll see that there are 11 national stations, 5 of which are digital only on the BBC. When we look at commercial stations, so we have two national commercial multiplexes. This is the first one, and you'll see there are 12 unique services on that multiplex. And when we look at the second, and this is the one that was launched just a couple of years ago, you'll see there are a further 19 services on there now. So, and these are all commercial stations. So it's because of DAB that commercial stations have been able to offer a national proposition. Just to say a little bit more about how that's been working. So it also allows broadcasters to extend their brands. So Bauer, one of our big commercial broadcasters here, has a kind of a core brand called Absolute Radio, and what they broadcast on analog and digital, but what they've done is spun out various sister brands based on a decade strategy. So we have Absolute 80s, Absolute 90s. So the core proposition is the same, but it allows them to target different pockets of listeners really successfully. All our other broadcasters have taken the same approach. So the three brands on the top there are all Bauer brands, and they have spun out sister stations on those brands. Global have done the same for their brands in the middle there, and then also Wireless, which is our third largest commercial group, has created sister brands around TalkSport. So all in all, when we look at the proposition for content on DAB nationally, these are the number of stations that as an analog listener you can receive on FM or AM. When we look at the digital stations, DAB stations, this is the proposition. So 43 national stations on DAB in the UK compared to, as I say, just those 8 on FM. So just a little bit about the local layer now. So I wanted to say something about these stations because we have a very rich and established heritage of local radio broadcasters. And historically, commercial broadcasters in the UK have been built around a local proposition and a local FM infrastructure. But what's happened now is a local DAB infrastructure has been successfully rolled out across the UK. It's comprised of 53 local multiplexes. And in terms of population and coverage, they're more the size of the jurisdictions you would have in the Caribbean. If they're around 250,000 if you look at kind of areas up in Scotland and Inverness and Aberdeen, for example, or 2 to 3 million if we look at more kind of metropolitan areas like Manchester and Birmingham. So this network of MUXes carries a combination of local BBC and commercial services, 420 thereabouts in total. And they are really much loved, popular brands, providing essential local news, weather and current affairs. And they play a really vital role in the communities that they serve. So under an agreement that came about in December 2014 between government and the local MUX operators and broadcasters, there was investment to improve this network to reach more households. So now an additional 10 million listeners have been brought into coverage and over 4,000 miles of roads that were previously not served. And in most major markets now, local DAB coverage is comparable to FM. I know Ben just referenced this, but I also wanted to say something about our small-scale DAB trials, again, just to demonstrate that local level. So one of the issues that we have as the radio industry in the UK that we need to address in ever transitioning fully to a digital infrastructure is providing a viable route for smaller stations to digital. So in 2015, Ofcom and government launched a series of 10 trials pioneering a new and highly cost-effective means of broadcasting DAB. The 10 trials licenses were awarded to parties in different areas who wanted to operate a small-scale license. They covered relatively small geographical areas compared with the local and national multiplexes. And they kept the costs low, as Ben explained, by using inexpensive transmission equipment that was freely available and open source. In September 2016, Ofcom concluded in a report that trials had been highly successful, and they're now in the process with government of developing a new, a more formal framework for licensing them all around the UK. So currently there are 150 services on air, and it's comprised of 60% commercial and 40% community, and it's caused just unprecedented innovation and diversity. And if once the structure is rolled out, it could allow for hundreds more small stations. So this is a picture of the stations that we're seeing now, and Bernie's telling me to wrap up, and I'm just about to finish. And so, as I said, they're community and they're commercial, and as I say, we hope to see many, many more. So that's it from me. I hope I've given you a sense of, you know, how digital has really allowed the industry to thrive in the UK, but also how, as well as being implemented nationally, we've also implemented DAB on a much smaller local level and ultra local level now as well. Sorry for overrunning. And I'm going to hand over to Jacqueline now, who I think will talk a little bit more about communications and cars.
Hello, everybody, and thank you, Yvette. I hope you shared this presentation with me. I loved it. So happy to tell you about the Digital Radio Netherlands case, because it's not me saying this, but it's the figures that say that the Netherlands have the most successful launch of DAB. So if I'm bragging, it is because I can represent the collaboration between broadcasters, because that's who I represent. I'm the project director of Digital Radio NL and a consultant for the Flemish government and vice president of WorldDAB. But today in my role for the Netherlands, representing commercial and public broadcasters. So, yeah. Radio listening in the Netherlands, just as the UK, is nearly 90% of the population listening to the radio weekly. That's over 13 million people. And they listen nearly 2 hours and 3/4 a day. So that's really a lot. And it's important to offer them good quality radio. And what we see is that distribution is shifting to digital, as you saw in the earlier presentations. And we discussed last year as well. It's shifting to mobile, online, and set-top boxes, but also broadcast, digital broadcast, DAB+. And radio listening is also increasingly more digital. As you saw in the UK, it's even much further than in the Netherlands. But in the Netherlands, it's also growing rapidly and changed already into only 52% Ether FM, so on-air FM, and 48% is other. It includes a little bit of cable listening in analog way, but this also includes DAB, online, and digital set-top box. So for the broadcasters, it is very clear that digital hybrid is already now and the future of radio. And it's all connected, DAB+ and IP. So these are all the forms and we need to be there. That's what we thought we had to do. So all stations decided to push DAB+ as the broadcasting backbone. So as the successor of FM, it is indeed our intention to switch over from FM to DAB+. We did not put a date yet, but I'll get back to that a little bit later. Their benefits, and Bernie already talked about this one, so I'm not going to talk about this slide, but it's just to repeat that it's just as important on a country level as on a worldwide level.
Hi, Jackie. Sorry,
yes.
Sorry to interrupt, but I don't know if it's just me, but your slides aren't moving on.
They are not?
Is it just me, or are Jackie's slides moving on for anyone else?
It's not moving on for me as well.
Ah.
No, it's in the first slide.
Then I'm glad to say you are at the first slide. I'm already at slide, okay.
I know, and it's a pity because I know they look really good.
Yes. Let me check.
If they still don't move, what we can do is also share the entire presentation along with the recording afterwards to our members.
What I'll do, but now the strange thing is that I lost my screen in which I can navigate on sharing. Do you see anything?
No, we're still on the first slide.
You're on the first slide and I don't even see the first slide anymore.
Yeah, you are sharing. You are sharing something.
I am sharing, but I cannot unshare and I cannot stop.
If you move your pointer to the top, move your cursor.
Yeah, I did that. Yeah.
And can you see share, unshare?
Yeah, I will do that, and
Yeah.
then I will. I will do something else. I'll do it in a. I did prepare for the fact that it would not work, but the strange thing is we just tested and then it did work. So.
And then I went into PowerPoint and got the PowerPoint open on the laptop.
Yeah. Oh my. This does not work either. It's very unfortunate, isn't it? Okay. You said top of the app. There I can share, and there. This should be working, I hope.
Right.
Okay.
You're sharing with us now. We're seeing the first slide.
Oh yeah, that's looking good.
Yeah, it's moving.
Okay, so I went through this mobile, online, broadcast set-top box, 52% on-air FM, connected and IP hybrid radio, pushing it as the successor of FM. And this is the slide you saw earlier with Bernie, with listeners, broadcasters, and society, that I won't go into depth. Then I come back to the 5 C's, where Yvette just talked about the 3 of them. These are all 5 of them, and they begin with good policy and regulation. And you have to do that together, in collaboration. You see, collaboration is key to success. If you do not collaborate, you can just shake it. It will not work. So the good thing is, if you are a broadcaster and you start talking to the government, and the government starts talking to the broadcasters, and you combine forces, both public as private broadcasters, then you can actually decide what policy and regulation is needed to implement this and not to get bankrupt when you want to go on to DAB and shift. Because if you have double costs, as we heard last year in the Caribbean as well, nobody can afford double costs. So you need to find solutions for that. And you do that in the very top, in the very beginning, on policy and regulation. You create opportunity, and WorldDAB can help you with examples throughout the world, which has been done. But you create the opportunity for broadcasters to actually make this switch. And as regulators, you have to help. So that's the first thing that needs to be done. And if that is properly done, then content can be adapted. Not only you have dual broadcasting, both FM and DAB, because the knowledgeable channels, they are the pushers of DAB+. But then, strangely enough, it's the new content that really matters, as you just saw at Yvette's. So I won't go into that there, but content really, really matters. The coverage needs to be good. If you buy a device, consumer devices, as you see in the middle, if you buy it and you go to the store, even if it is only €20 or $20, it needs to work. Because if the coverage is not good, you bring back your consumer device and never try it again. So the experience needs to be good. And in cars, yeah, that's a battle. It's a battle to get it in there. So it's very good that we collaborate throughout WorldDAB and with EBU and the car industry to make it standard in every car, and the chip manufacturers are doing that as well. And then, most of all, if you have all that in place, you have to have clear communication. And if you have clear communication, then if you work with the entire industry, the entire chain, so then it's clear for consumers what they can expect. So that's where we kicked off. We started to collaborate between the public broadcaster, the commercial broadcasters, and the Ministry of Economic Affairs. And we implemented, we call it the project office, we call it Digital Radio Netherlands. And we have a steering board, and we gather every 2 months. And we work together, competitors, all competitors, and even a little bit of an enemy as used to be, like the government. We were not all broadcasters and government, we're not getting along very well in the past. And we are actually working together on the future of radio to keep it just as popular as it is today, but digital. And we work together with the regional channels, but also with the Consumer Electronic VR organization, with all retail organizations. So all of them are united in Uneto VNI, and a RAI-vereniging, which is the car industry in the Netherlands. So we work all together, the entire chain. Then we put in place the content. as Yvette explained, these are the Dutch variants of what you saw is happening in England. And we have different networks, so different coverage actually, but both the ones at the top, NPO and VCR, those are the nationwide broadcasters, public and commercial. And those networks are really good. So perception is good. If you buy a radio, it works most of the time. You never know, because there can always be something in the area that is giving trouble, but it should be working fine. Both indoor as mobile reception. Devices are very good available, as Bernie explained, so this is just a repetition. I'm not going into depth in this slide. Most important to know is that there's a 100% commitment from the Dutch government and the broadcasters to go for DAB+. So we make yearly plans from 2014 with a perspective to 2023, because we expect that most listening, 70%, will be digital. And that is when we will start to decide to switch over from FM to DAB+. And we need this communication plan for it. And this communication plan, we put in goals on knowledge, on attitude, on behavior. So then we decided on percentages that we wanted to reach per year. And we gave a briefing to our agency, and we started our large public campaign, our yearly campaign, working together, using all the channels, giving the same message again and again and again in a new jacket, of course, to make it happy and to surprise people with the message. But most important thing is to inform people about the existence of DAB+ and what already the benefits are. So we do that in flights, as you can see here on this slide. There are different slides throughout the year, so it won't be all the time, although some stations do put it in their top of the hours. And that's always a very happy thing when that happens. And, but we have a beautiful campaign, and I'd like to show you an example of that. I'll do that in a second. We also have a website. That website is from digital. You can find all the information. You can even listen, because it's digital, it's hybrid. You can listen through online. So that, not on DAB, but here you can listen online. And you can ask your questions and you'll get a reply from us. And this is the commercial for television that we made. Oh, that's straight. Oh, that's of course because this is the PDF. I'll end with the commercial. I'll do this first. So we have the week of the digital radio. This is a very important week, and it's part, if you see in June, you see the 2 weeks, Digital Radio Week here in the middle. And then if we go here, all the channels that you saw participate. So if you have your own hero, if you are a fan from for Radio 538, for example, Edwin Evers in the morning, he's your DJ hero and he's your friend. He will tell you all about DAB+ and the USPs. But if you are if your hero works at Radio 10, he will tell you, or she will tell you all about DAB+. They give the same message, but in their own tone. So the USPs are the same, and the message is the same, but the tone of voice is different because it's a classical station or a jazz station or a hip-hop station or whatever. So what also happens is that every day that week, listeners can win DAB+ radios. So there's all kinds of different ways that you can do a contest on the radio. And we promote it on radio, television, and online. And that promotion is all the same, everywhere. So that's very recognizable. But most importantly, it is supported by all manufacturers, the retail and the e-tail. This means that not only you hear that this week on the radio, on all stations, but you can see it in your door-to-door ads with the folders that come in from the retailers, like the Media Market or the big retail chains with more than 1,400 stores throughout the Netherlands. They all participate. So it's very recognizable. And there's homepages with DAB Plus info and ads, and there's POS material in the stores. So it's all there. And online we do contests on Facebook pages. And what we also do is we have a digital radio day every year. And we involve all stakeholders, and we tell them about the status and the progress. And it's an inspiration on where we collaborate and where we are. And this is how we get, this is the present, I'll show you. This is how we get to these results that make us best in class throughout Europe. The first 4 years of implementing DAB+. We sold nearly 900,000 DAB+ radios since 2014. And in Q4 2017, there was a new record. We have a name awareness now, which was 0 4 years ago, of 72%. We're very happy with that. And hi, I'm nearly, I need to finish. Yeah, I'm nearly done. This is just 2 slides before the end. Newly sold cars, 37% of them are line fit with DAB+, which is a good percentage. As you saw from Norway and Denmark, they've been having DAB+ much longer than we have. And I know that in the second half of 2017, this percentage was already 39%. So we're growing there, and we want to be, if the people with 41% as option, so the manufacturers with 41% as option, change that into standard, we can be the quickest on cars as well. And there's 28% of the Dutch population intends to buy a digital radio. The use of DAB+ tripled in the last 2 years to 13%. That's 2 million people nowadays that use it. And our ambition is that every radio sold can receive digital, which is in line with what Bernie says with the discussion on a European level. But we do this also without legislation, talking to the retailers and the manufacturers to achieve this all together in this year to come, and in this year 2018, that every radio which is in stores is a digital radio, so not FM only anymore. And we expect that digital listening will be more than 70% by the end of by 2023. So this is to wrap up, and the only thing I can do is yeah, but I don't know if I can share this. If I can, it's only 30 seconds.
Wat zijn de klachten?
Nou, zou je misschien even naar mijn oren willen kijken? Want alles klinkt zo analoog.
Ach ja, ik zal maar meteen met de deur in huis vallen. Het zijn niet uw oren, het is uw radio.
Wat?
Ik ga u DAB+ voorschrijven. Kijk eens, 3 maal daags, een uurtje.
Geniet van digitale radio met DAB+, de digitale opvolger van FM.
Let's get digital.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jackie, and sorry to pester about time. I'm not sure that we have time, Sonia. I'll follow your lead on whether we have any time or if anyone has a burning question that they wanted to ask one of the speakers.
Well, if we can ask our facilitators to just stay with us for a couple minutes, I do believe there are a couple of questions. I see that CTU has already unmuted. That's Nigel Casimir. So Nigel, do you want to jump in? I see your hand is raised. So please go ahead with your first question quickly and advise to whom it's directed.
Yes, thank you very much, Sonia. I think I have to thank all the presenters this morning and the CBU as well for this very informative session on DAB. And in the CTU, that's the Caribbean Telecommunications Union, we try to harmonize policies and practices around the Caribbean, and we've been working a lot in spectrum management harmonization, and in particular, harmonizing approaches to digital transition on the TV side, right? So digital TV as opposed to digital radio. So that's why I was quite interested in the digital radio side. My question really though relates to making the case to the broadcasters to make the transition, because that's the challenge we've had with respect to the digital TV transition. How do we effectively make the case to the broadcasters in our small markets? And you all gave some examples of some of the smaller local markets in England and Scotland, but still you're talking about markets that might be 250,000 listeners, which is on the large side as far as the Caribbean is concerned. In most of the cases, we're talking tens of thousands. So I was happy to hear about the low-cost DAB plus option that might be relevant. But really the question is, what good strategies could we have for bringing the broadcasters on board and also migrating the users or attracting the users over to digital radio? Because a lot of them, well, all of them would have now their FM radios and not even know that they're missing out on anything. So if we could get some thoughts on that, I'd appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay. Casimir, thank you for your question. I think what we've seen at WorldDAB is that each country has a very different geography and a very different radio broadcast landscape. So there's often a very different set of drivers that would cause broadcasters to go digital. And quite often we find that what helps is that if there's a champion, somebody in the country who will lead the charge for digital radio. And the reason for that might be because the FM is extremely congested, or perhaps the FM infrastructure is due for renewal. And it's a time to question whether to reinvest in FM or whether to make the transition to digital in view of TV having gone digital and all the other connectivity and all the other reasons we mentioned before. But I think as well, I would be curious to hear perhaps from Jackie and from Yvette on how they brought broadcasters with them in their country. So Yvette, do you want to start with just a few quick points on how it happened in the UK? And then maybe Jackie can say how it happened, because they're both quite different size markets.
Yeah, I think in the UK, like obviously a key thing is understanding the opportunity for commercial broadcasters that I outlined, and how it allowed commercial broadcasters, because FM spectrum was full, it's only through the implementation of DAB that commercial broadcasters were able to launch new services, notably national services, and therefore compete on a more even playing field with the BBC, because all of the national services up until DAB, the majority of them were BBC services. And then the other thing that I would say from a broadcaster point of view that has been really, really helpful is regulation, so, and the licensing regime. So for broadcasters to have their FM or their analog licenses renewed, they had to also commit to doing dual transmission in DAB. So that was obviously a very big motivator as well. So I would say that those have been the two key things. And also, and you know, Jackie underlined this too, is the idea of collaboration. So commercial and public broadcasters working together, and then working together with government and regulators. That's another key element, is the fact that we're all in it together, we're all pushing for the same objectives.
Okay, thanks Yvette.
Thank you.
Jackie, did you want to say a few points on how you saw broadcasters being brought along to digitize in the Netherlands?
Yeah, we've been working on it for years. We, as commercial broadcasters, were quite late to get licenses for FM. It was very difficult because of full spectrum. And then when commercial broadcasters got them, it appeared that nearly none of them had a national coverage. So there was not enough spectrum available on FM to get the national coverage. So what we did in the end, before 2011, was we lobbied a lot at the government to make it possible to have lengthening of our FM frequencies. So you know for sure that you keep your existence, because it's very dangerous if you have to do a new beauty contest or new auctions or whatever. In FM licensing, that's always scary. So we wanted to have the licenses renewed, but then under the condition that we would move and implement digital radio on air. And so the regulator did not say you have to do DAB+. That was a choice the market made together. But they did say you get a digital license and you have some kind of quality standards in that license. So the licenses of FM were renewed under the condition to commit to digitalization on air. So that's one. We knew and we know that it will be cheaper in the future. So that's second. FM is more it costs just much more, as you have seen in the presentations earlier today. There's better coverage because the coverage is nationwide. And there's more capacity, so you can actually put on more channels. We will get, I did not tell you yet, but we will get an extra national multiplex. So that's fantastic. So there's more coverage and more channels available than on FM. And last but not least, if I don't forget anything else, it's ownership rules. They changed them. Where a few years ago it was not possible to have a certain amount of channels, those rules changed. I won't go into depth because it's too complicated, but we can give more information if people want that. These made it possible to move, and you could say, why would the public broadcaster would join in this? But the same efforts for public broadcasters are there. They have more channels available. Spectrum's full, and it is tremendously expensive to have the FM frequencies. AM is already switched off, was it 1.5 years ago? So that already differs a few million euros a year. So most of those reasons.
Thank you. Okay. So,
do we have any more questions? I'm not seeing any. Oh yes, I'm seeing Nigel's hand again. All right, Nigel. Bernie, we can take one last.
Sure.
Okay, so Nigel and responses, and then we wrap up.
Yes, I was waiting to see if anyone else raised their hand before I did again, but since no one else did, there is one other thing that I could put into the mix in terms of the Caribbean environment. The question is, the economics of the DAB Plus really comes out when we can multiplex channels on one frequency and the costs go down and so on. But the question that arises in my mind, and I don't know if Sonia, you or Gary, who might still be on, could comment on this as well. Do we have the content, the volume of content in the Caribbean to really take advantage of these multiplex opportunities? And especially when we're talking about the micro markets that I mentioned, which, you know, several islands populations of less than 100,000, for example. Do we have the content volumes available, or maybe if the opportunity comes up, you know, could we really take advantage of that in the Caribbean to give DAB Plus a push towards it?
I would quickly say yes. Even in populations as small as Antigua and Barbuda, for example, there's nearly 24 radio services there with a wide range of content. So I don't think content is our challenge. I think the policy provisions have to be right. They have to be done in a consultative manner. And I think the business case has to be very clearly placed on the table. And there has to be a sharing of the burden of taking forward. This series of webinars has actually been initiated by the broadcasters. And in the discussions that our members are having with their respective regulators, we're not yet seeing on the regulatory side an appreciation of the need to move forward. So actually it's the broadcasters who are the ones who are raising this issue and saying, in order to continue serving and in order to continue to meet the needs of our audiences across the region. We're looking at this in a very detailed way. We're getting help from important partners like WorldDAB, who have been attending our events and sensitizing our members. So I think the policy and infrastructural issues and the business case issues also have to be addressed in a very structured way, as has happened in the UK, as has happened in the Netherlands.
Sonia, can I ask a question? From what you know of your members, or Gary, what's your feeling for what could be the main reasons that broadcasters in your region would want to digitize? What are the drivers?
I think once they see the move away from the technology and obsolescence, when it comes to the point where you have to decide, do I continue with the latest FM or do I move to digital? That is a critical part. Colleagues, I'm very, very sorry, but I actually have another video planned in 3 minutes time on this same platform. So we're going to have to wrap up very quickly.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Sonia, right. And lovely to meet you, Gary, as well. And
yes,
all
thanks. If I could just give you one brief statement. The broadcasters are under the gun and the pressure of the high cost of continuing to operate high-powered FM systems. So the attraction is how it could reduce costs significantly.
Yes.
Okay, interesting. And from what you know, what would be because it's a big region with a lot of countries, where would you say the most urgent need and potential there is for digitizing radio? Where would you start?
Obviously, in the bigger markets, the FM spectrum has been maximized in Jamaica. They have licenses that have been granted, but no spectrum available for them to start operating. We have over 30 radio stations in this market. The Trinidad market has over 40 radio stations. Some of them are in fact sharing infrastructure, but that's on an analog basis. So greater efficiency on a digital basis would obviously be more attractive. And even in smaller territories with populations under 200,000, you have over 10 radio stations in some instances. Again, it can't be economically viable for them to be all doing this on analog infrastructure. So it would all redound to the benefit of the business, which would then lead to an improvement of the programming, which would then lead to a diversity of the services that they can offer. So I think those are the driving forces.
Yeah, well, I think Europe then, the case studies across Europe are very much relevant to your region, albeit your region is perhaps larger and I think there are a lot of case studies, particularly the small scale as well that Ben and Yvette touched on, as well as the bigger national coverage and. So
and the broadcasters have really been holding up their hand and saying, you're talking to the TV guys about digital switchover. Some of us actually have integrated platforms carrying both TV and radio. That being the case, why are you just talking about one aspect of it when the other side of it is under similar pressure in terms of cost and the need to upgrade quality and give the consumers a greater space in a digital world?
Might I do a suggestion? For last year, we talked about this as well. Is it an option, Sonia and Bernie, that there will be some kind of overview made by Sonia or somebody there in which we can see every region with the number of FM stations, both public and private. So you have the difference there. So we know the number per region. And the number of population, so we can pick out then the top 10 of biggest markets, and do with perhaps Ben or somebody else a case which shows what could be the cost efficiency for the future, and then we give some tools so you can talk to the regulators in the Caribbean to help you to get rules in that you don't have to pay double, so that you're being helped for the time that you have dual the transmission, if it is interesting in the first place. Perhaps that is a way to make it more practical, so you have something to grab on instead that it's just a theory.
Yeah, that's a great offer, and we are going to move on that, providing you with the kind of information that you can help us to structure the argument to the regulators at the regional level and at the national level. Colleagues, do forgive me, but as I said, we've gone more than 30 minutes past where we had planned to be. It's been a really interesting discussion. I want to take host's privilege and say a sincere thank you to every presenter. Just to advise you that this recording is going to be shared with all of our members and with our partners such as CTU, such as the regulator in Eastern Caribbean, ECTEL, and our other member stakeholders and partners that we work with. I am going to invite those who are presenters here to expect queries to come directly to you after this and after the circulation. So don't be surprised if you see an email from someone saying, I'm a broadcaster in St. Kitts and Nevis, tell me more about X, Y, or Z of your presentation, because they were all extremely helpful and we really, really appreciate it. But we have to wrap up.
We're very happy to take further questions, and we also look forward to participating in your annual conference this year, which I think is in Jamaica, and perhaps we can work on a dedicated DAB session, and perhaps we can, you know, speak directly with the broadcasters to understand even better their needs and how DAB can help.
Thank you so much for that, Bernie, and thank you all very, very much. Nigel, I see your raised hand, but I can't accommodate you. The other meeting has already begun on another platform.
I'm just saying thank you.
We're on email.
Yeah, I'm just saying thank you.
Goodbye.
Thank you so much. Have a good day, everyone. Rest
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.